Comair's legal challenge against government's bailouts for state carrier SAA continued today at the North Gauteng High Court. Comair argues that the guarantees given to SAA are bailouts and contravene policies and laws such as the Domestic Aviation Transport Policy and the Constitution. Now, yesterday, the banks had given South African Airways a loan against a R5 billion government guarantee, put forward their arguments. Well, for the latest on what has happened today in court, we take you to Mbongeni Muthwa, who is at the North Gauteng High Court. Mbongeni, good afternoon. Let's start with what the banks are saying about this court action brought about by Comair. I mean, essentially, they are the ones lending SAA the money, aren't they?
Absolutely, Devin, they are. There is a lot at stake for the banks here, as you can imagine. Just to give you some numbers, currently, SAA has loans with 4 major banks. That's Nedbank, Standard Bank, Citibank, and ABSA. It owes Nedbank 1.8 billion rands. It owes Standard Bank 1.5 billion rand. It owns Citibank 1.5 billion rand. And it owes ABSA 1.7 billion rand. If you total those amounts, they come to about 6.5 billion, which is more than the 5 billion which Comair is responding to here, is talking about. Of course, government has since then given another multi-billion rand extension of the guarantees to SAA earlier this year. And the banks are saying, you know, what Comair is asking for these guarantees to be declared illegal and unconstitutional is going to put those loans at a very high risk. Earlier we heard from the lawyer of Standard Bank, Mr. Senior Counsel Bruce Leach, arguing that exact point. Right now we can actually take a quick listen at what he had to say earlier, Devin.
For all of those reasons, my lord, but particularly in the case of Standard Bank, because of the commercial impracticality and unreality of it, it simply is not an order that is feasible or sustainable. And it's also not an order, for the reasons that I mentioned before, that is cognizable in law. It simply doesn't disclose a cause of action.
Well, Comair's legal team obviously listening to that. Mbongeni, what's their reaction be?
Well, it's very interesting that the CEO of Comair, Mr. Eric Fenter, has been here each and every day since this hearing started. He was here the whole day on Tuesday. He was here the whole day yesterday. And he's here again today, sitting and listening very attentively to the arguments. I did get a chance during the break to ask him for his reaction to what the banks are arguing. And his answer was, you know what, these banks are barking at the wrong tree. What Comair is seeking, according to him, is not for the existing loans to be declared illegal and unconstitutional. It's only seeking the courts to stop the government from giving SAA more guarantees going forward. We can actually take a listen quickly at exactly what he had to say himself on this issue, Devin.
We're not looking for retroactive correction to this, and therefore it won't affect the banks at all. We've said we're only looking at prospective remedy, so looking forward, and therefore that if it's found that this process of funding is not correct, then it'll simply impact on future funding of SAA, not on past funding.
To the Comair CEO. Now, Mbongeni, before I let you go, we spoke about the implications of a ruling against government yesterday. It's becoming increasingly clear that there are many contractors, many suppliers tied to this, aren't there?
There are. In fact, if you look at this, if Comair succeeds with this application, it will open up a can of worms beyond just the loans, the already existing loans to the banks. For instance, there is talk that the latest guarantee that SAA got from the government in January this year, and this new multi-billion rand guarantee, SAA needs that or is using that to repay some of the already existing loans, not just to fund its operations in order that it can remain flying. So it means that if the court grants this application, the ability of SAA to really repay the existing debt from these bailouts from the government will be removed, and that will be a big problem for the banks. SAA has bought or leased planes from suppliers such as Airbus, and they are servicing those debts. if SAA can't get money from the government anymore going forward, the status of those contracts that they already have will come into question. It's just an endless can of worms. A lot is at stake here. In fact, so much so that earlier, yesterday, the government lawyers were certain that this case was going to be wrapped up today, not going to Monday as it was originally scheduled. But since the submissions of the banks, Comair lawyers have asked that they do need the extra day to compose their thoughts, to be able to respond to what especially Nedbank raised yesterday afternoon. So the judges agreed that they will come back here now on Thursday to wrap things up. It's really a huge case, Devin. Whatever happens eventually will have far-reaching implications, especially if this application is granted.
Right, indeed, all right. So Mbongeni Muthwa there at the North Gauteng High Court. We'll get more from him in our later bulletins.